The cinema's first true artist was the magician George Melies. He had tried to buy the Lumiere cinematograph after attending the landmark public screening in Paris on the 28th of December 1895. He built his own camera and built a glass studio in his home in Montreux, the first custom-built film studio in the world. The discovery, which opened up a whole world of possibilities for the cinema, was supposedly made by Melies in the spring of 1898, when his camera stopped while filming on the Place d'Opera in Paris. By the time the camera was set in motion again, the scene had changed. In the developed film, women became men. A bus changed into a hearse. Melies realised that he could use the camera like a conjurer. He could make impossible things happen on film. The accident suggested other techniques too, like superimposition and double exposure. Melies' taste for the fantastic chimed with audiences at the turn of the century. Though as well as his most famous film, the sci-fi fantasy A Trip to the Moon, he made melodramas, reconstructed newsreels, literary adaptations, horror and comedy. Though his special effects with the camera were wholly cinematic, Melies was very theatrical in his backgrounds. He often designed these himself and the costumes. With these films we are always conscious of watching a stage. He seemed to lack the imagination to make the most of his discoveries. Though D.W. Griffith later said, "I owe him everything." Pathé Frères, the huge French company, bought out Melies in 1911. He hadn't moved with the times, while others had advanced way beyond his innovations. In 1923, Pathé seized everything Melies owned, and for the last 15 years of his life he sold confectionery and toys at a shop on the Gare Montparnasse. A contemporary of Melies, who had started in the business as a projectionist, Edwin S. Porter, went further than anyone before in developing film as a way of telling stories. Porter was likely inspired by a British film, Fire, which documented each stage of an alarm to make life of an American fireman, which was revolutionary in its use of cross-cutting, which was impossible on stage, and in realising that in telling a story on film a rigid chronology of events wasn't always necessary. In 1903, the Great Train Robbery represented a giant step forward for the American film industry. Directed by Porter for the Edison Company, this 12-minute film was one of the main reasons why American movies soon left behind the slot machine era. Playing one of the train robbers was Gilbert M. Anderson, later to become famous as the first Western star, Bronco Billy.
They were all seated there, and they came out and made an announcement. They're going to see something wonderful, a great train robbery. And the audience didn't seem to take to the idea very much, and then started. Then as it started, they all started to get boisterous and yelled and shouted, "Catch 'em, catch 'em!" And after the picture was over, they all stood up and cheered and shouted, "Run it again, run it again!" After it was over, they all, in one acclaim, gave it a rousing, rousing reception. And I said to myself then, that's it. It's going to be the picture business for me. The future has no end.
A big hit of the 1904 St. Louis Exposition was the Hales tour. Travel across the country was prohibitively expensive, so a Kansas City fire chief had the idea of building reproductions of Pullman cars, equipping them with machinery to suggest swaying, hissing and banging, then projecting a film taken from a locomotive. A number of theatre entrepreneurs, later to be among the most important producers in American cinema, Sam Warner, Carl Laemmle and Adolf Zucker, were inspired by the success of the Hales tour. A turning point came in 1905, when customers flocked to Zucker's theatre to see Porter's The Great Train Robbery, and the Hales tour was soon replaced by a new craze for Nickelodeon movie theatres. By 1907 there were more than 7,000 early motion picture theatres. called Nickelodeons because a nickel was charged for admission all over the United States. The Nickelodeon craze was fueled by the fact that all you needed to break into the picture business was a projector, a vacant store, and a few chairs. Charles Patty was the first real movie mogul who established a monopoly of production, distribution and exhibition. In some ways, Patty had more influence than any future studio head, because he established an international empire, opening branches in every part of the world where films were shown. Patty distributed twice as much film as the entire American film industry in 1908. Monopolies were nothing new in the US industry too. After 1896 there was a demand in the US for the right to project movies. To satisfy this, producers and exhibitors cheerfully ignored Edison's patents. In 1897 Edison fought back, armed with the patent for the Latham loop used in cameras and projectors. He sued every company which used the loop. The Patents Company, or the Trust as it became known, first appeared in 1908, and the members submitted royalties for the right to use Edison's kinetoscope. They also cornered the market in film stock by signing an exclusive deal with George Eastman. In 1910, the Trust entered the field of exhibition with the formation of the General Film Company. Now any distributors had to pay $2 a week to show the Trust films. Independents like Carl Laemmle and William Fox rebelled. The Trust retaliated with strong-arm tactics, reflecting the gangsterism of the Prohibition era. Gangs smashed equipment, shooting holes in the cameras.
Hoodlums could appear with a gun suddenly and take away the camera or shoot it. They found that by shooting holes through the cameras, they could stop their use. And that became their favorite method.
It had a history from the very outset of piracy, robbing. Everybody was violating everybody else's patents, but all in secret, you know, behind the scenes. And there were early days when bicycling prints from one theater to the other. While Theater A is running reel 1, Theater B has got reel 3, and the guys are bicycling the print all over town. And then they run it through a laboratory and dupe it and steal it. So everybody had a hand in the till.
Well, the Trust was soon totally defeated and disbanded as the independents were more keen to experiment and link big names with big pictures through the star system. Carl Laemmle led the way in this with his appropriately named Independent Motion Picture Company, IMP. The earliest actors in films weren't credited, but the public attached names to their favourites all the same. They dubbed them the girl with the golden curls or the biograph girl, even when they didn't know their real names. The biograph girl was actually Florence Lawrence, one of the most popular personalities of the time. In 1910, Lawrence moved to Carl Laemmle's IMP company, and the cunning mogul circulated the rumour that the biograph girl was no more, that she had been killed in St. Louis in a streetcar accident. He then capitalised on this by trumpeting big ads in the newspapers that she was alive and well, and now working for his company. Her personal appearance in St. Louis shortly after resulted in bigger crowds than had greeted the president the week before. The star system was born. One way of avoiding the Trust was by going west to California. The main centre of American filmmaking before 1911 had been New York, but D.W. Griffith filmed in Hollywood in 1910, and soon a group of studios began opening around Sunset Boulevard.
Hollywood itself is a place we went to on the big red streetcars, or drove to if we had an automobile, and worked in. And left in the evening when the sun went down, and left it peaceful and quiet.
mother went to work in a hotel in Los Angeles. She met movie people that were coming out to investigate possibilities of making movies in California. So they asked her where a good place was. She mentioned Edendale right away because we lived there, we liked it, the climate was fine. So sure enough, they came out, looked at the little valley, and it became one of the early motion picture studios.
Though escaping the trust was a major advantage, it wasn't the only thing Southern California offered the pioneer filmmakers. Above all, it offered long daylight hours in an era when film depended on sunlight with sets open to the elements. Also a diversity of scenery, which could evoke locations all over the world. Los Angeles also had a plentiful supply of casual labour and cheap land on which studios could build standing sets and backlots. Hollywood's first important feature production was Cecil B. DeMille's Squawman. The early years of Hollywood were characterised by a strong sense of optimism and community feeling. In this atmosphere, entrepreneurs who had begun as minor exhibitors founded the companies which were to dominate the industry until the 1950s.
We used old buildings, barns, anything available that would house our equipment. We had no electric light. They were all open-air shots. When it was raining, there'd be a rush to grab a piece of furniture and get it in out of the rain until the rain would pass, and then we'd put it out again, shoot a few scenes.
We would sometimes be at the studio till 8 or 10 o'clock at night and walk home and stand on the corner and talk about pictures and how to do this and overacting and overexposure and all these things for 2 and 3 hours.
The pictures that you worked on in those days, the money wasn't there. There was no union, so there was no time. You worked Sundays and holidays, no extra pay. But it was a family. It was a very close-knit group of people. Everybody would help each other. They wouldn't try to hinder you or push you down. It was just everybody would work. And it was fun. It was real fun.